Good morning and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on this beautiful Friday morning, 30 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. That we do come to you live on this beautiful morning to digest some of the things that did transpire in the course of the night in the UEFA Europa League as well as the UEFA Conference League before um, before we can proceed to the weekend action that there is to come our way. But before we get all that started, allow me to have our audios tested and make sure everything does check out. But while I'm at it, good morning to you, Pedri. How are you doing? I hope you had a wonderful night. We did miss you last night, but whatever it is that kept you busy, we hope you are successful in accomplishing it. For those of you that have recently joined the channel as new subscribers, welcome to the Football Tribe UG community. I hope you do enjoy your stay with us here. Just go over to the channel over the video section, over the short section, over the live section, and watch all our content that may catch your attention and leave us down a comment, and we will continue to engage further. But otherwise, I hope you all doing well as far as this beautiful morning is concerned. Barcelona Villarreal won't be played in America. Yes, that's a that's a topic we did discuss over the last couple of broadcasts. I think twice, although you are absent, and I kept making references to you having brought the topic to us and the manner in which we had discussed it at the time. And yeah, I think, is it a welcome move? Of course, the Spanish domestic football fans will welcome it, but even those that the Spanish Federation look to endear itself to, as well as La Liga over there in the United States, may sort of feel a bit of a loss on that one. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, in my opinion, although it's not as easy as we would want to slice it. That give and take. Like I said in my earlier submission, for the Spanish Federation and for La Liga, they are drawing comparisons to the Premier League, not because the Premier League has taken away its games to be played over there in the United States, but in terms of commercial value, we know that the Premier League does preponderate any other league that there is across Europe in terms of viewership, in terms of broadcast revenue, and they are trying to build towards that. For those of you that do follow the sport as much as we do, you've noticed that in some leagues, even broadcast revenue has sort of gone down a notch, lower, especially in the post-COVID economies. So it's been a bit of a struggle for some of these leagues to raise revenue and everything in that regard, So leagues like the Spanish La Liga are doing their best to see how better can they promote their leagues? How best can they promote their domestic league? How best can they improve on their commercial value? I mean, we all know that you remember the idea of creating the European League. Teams like Barcelona, Juventus, and Real Madrid, the goal was to try and improve on their revenues through broadcast rights, through of course more games being played so that they have something to sell to the fans and things like that. But the bottom line of it is that it is the commercial value, that is attached to it. We know the kinds of financial stress that Barcelona have had to go through, and I'm not sure they are, that the dust has really critically settled within Barcelona when it comes to their financials, because when you look at their books, I think there's still a lot of debt to it in terms of transfer fees that they owe. When they went through that storm, you saw that they significantly reduced on the value of the players they do sign and how many they do sign. They looked more to the academy to try and improve their fortunes. They have been successful while at it, but there have been some sufferings, including, for those of you that care to remember, a season when Barcelona had to play in the UEFA Europa League, But of course, footballers in the Spanish La Liga have come out to protest that. We saw over the recent weekend game starting and footballers protesting the opening 15, 20 seconds of the game, and not play as a sign of protest to say we do not welcome the decision or the idea of taking that Barcelona game against Villarreal over there in Miami. And like I said, I understand the perspective of I understand the perspective of the Spanish fans. I understand where they're coming from, but I also understand where the Spanish Federation and perhaps the La Liga minders, where they are coming from in terms of them wanting to sell their product to a bigger market, to globalize the game. I was giving examples yesterday because this is a topic we spent quite some time on yesterday morning, and I was saying, when you go away from the respective countries, from the UK, from Spain, from France, from Germany, from Italy, from Netherlands, be it Scotland, whatever it is, when you go away from those respective countries, where you believe that the domestic league is the most popular, league of football that there is, once you go out of those countries, elsewhere you'll find, and I'm not saying in every other country, but in many, many countries, the Premier League is more popular as compared to those, other leagues. And while we could grade them in terms of, particularly for Uganda, Premier League, Spanish La Liga, German Bundesliga, Premier League, Spanish La Liga, Italian German Bundesliga, and French League One, you'll find even within that context that the gap between the Premier League and the Spanish La Liga is too big. It's too big in terms of fan reception, in terms of how people follow it, because you will find, let's say, out of 100 people, you'll find maybe, just maybe, about 10 people that really, really watch the Spanish La Liga. I'm talking about the Ugandan context. And those people will either be football diehards, they'll have a team they support that they particularly pay allegiance to, or they are media personalities or sports personalities. They need to follow up on the league for them to be able to relay news and analysis and context at their respective listeners or viewers. Then you'll find that the other maybe 10, maybe another 10 to 15% of those that try to follow the Spanish La Liga, it's for betting reasons. So that means you have a combined total of about 25%. So leaving the other 75% untended to. So you can see that everybody has a particular motive. But even if you were to throw out that motive, even those that are following the Spanish La Liga for those very, very reasons that we've stated below, I do not think that you can compare that followership or the frequency or how detailed they follow it as the way they do the Premier League. I'll give you an example. It's easy for a football fan to tell you who the goalkeeper of Burnley is in the Premier League than who the goalkeeper of Sevilla is, who the goalkeeper of Valencia is. But let's be honest, Valencia, Sevilla, those are bigger teams than Burnley are, So in the whole grand scheme of things, the idea is that La Liga and the Spanish Federation want to tap into those other global markets. And I do not think there comes any other bigger market than the USA, At a time when they have the Major League Soccer that is growing, I believe it to be growing season in, season out. They're going to host the FIFA World Cup too. When you go back in the post-COVID era, I think, or even slightly before, global football brands have been more and more going over to the United States for their pre-season tours. Why are they doing that? To win over more fans, to endear themselves more to the growing football fan base over there, even though they have their basketball, they have their American football, and everything in that regard. But you can see that the attempts are very, very intentional. You look at the Premier League, as popular as it is already, they just had the Premier League mini summer series that had Manchester United, West Ham, Bournemouth, and Everton, are played over in Atlanta. Again, same thing to further promote the Premier League. Last I checked, the Premier League were trying to, I don't know if they were the ones trying or it was Netflix trying to have negotiations to include it to Netflix. They, they want to put the sport in as many forums or in as many broadcast avenues as possible. Let me tell you, one thing is certain, and take this to the bank. In the next 3 to 5 years, or even 5 to 10 years, depending on which way you look at it, but at least I anticipate 3 to 5 years. Football on TV is going to shrink a bit. Not because TVs won't be broadcasting it anymore or won't want to broadcast it anymore, but because other streaming platforms are coming on board to take on matches. For example, you have Prime, Amazon Prime. They have the Premier League. You're going to have other streaming platforms get these games so that people can watch more of the game on the go. So that all you need is, if let's say you paid your $10 for Netflix and it gives you access to certain Premier League games, you can stream the game on the go. You know how people, particularly, I do not know whether it's the same case for you, but particularly on this side of the continent, people struggle to stream games. I mean, you need a DSTV subscription, you bought a decoder, everything is expensive and things like that. So over time, it's going to become an aggregation of numbers, where people like Netflix, Hulu, HBO, and other streaming platforms are trying to get football matches on board. In other words, it could be tiered up that, for example, you watch what you pay for. Take an example. If let's say I'm a Netflix subscriber and I'm like, not so much interested in the movies, give me football. That's what they will give me. That's in the distant future. If I'm a Netflix subscriber and I want both, I'll have a package, and things like that. Look at it. Look at the way podcasts have gone all over the place. It's no longer about YouTube. People do YouTube, but they do, what is it called? Patreon. They do Spotify. They do Apple Podcasts and things like that. So in other words, the access to content is increasingly becoming more and more important. So even the games, it's going to boil down to that. So the Spanish La Liga, in the attempt, now you could argue that they could have done better or they could have taken better decisions in terms of selling the Spanish La Liga to other audiences. But also, for me, I practically understand where they are coming from. They are trying to play catch up. They are trying to play recovery, So, for let's say for a moment's thought, let's try and find out where or how much was broadcast revenue from the Spanish La Liga this last season. How much was the broadcast revenue for La Liga last season? Let's find out what that was, in just a bit. And I'm asking Gemini on this one, Now, the reported broadcast revenue for Spanish La Liga during the 2023-2024 season was approximately 1.5 billion euros. Now, the league is in a 5-year broadcast rights deal between 2022-2023 to 2026-2027, valued at 4.9 billion euros. This works to approximately about 990 million euros per season for domestic rights, alone. Now, again, when you go away from the domestic rights, globally, are those numbers improving? Let's say compare that to the Premier League. Let's do the comparisons and we see where we land. you'll see that there's going to be a huge deficit. Now, the Premier League alone had about 3.3 billion euros in the same season, 2023-2024. Now you can see that huge disparity. 1.5 billion euros for Spanish La Liga, and then 3.3 billion for the Premier League. So that's what they are trying to chase down, the money, the revenues. How do we get growing? So there's so you'll find that there's a massive disparity, that the Premier League's total broadcast income is approximately 1.8 to 2.2 times that of the Spanish La Liga, which is the most striking difference between the two leagues in terms of finances. So, and the driving force for that is the international rights. The Premier League's dominance is largely driven by the enormous success in selling international broadcast rights. In Africa, you had MalChoice. I think the guys buy the rights for the Premier League and trying to sell it to the rest of the continent. Now, it's not to say that Africa is not buying broadcast rights for Spanish La Liga. They are buying, but at what value? So, and La Liga's international rights are significantly lower at around 897 million per season. So at the end of the day, it's about how better they can. Sorry, I could not get the figures, particularly from last season, and I had used the figures from a season before that. But it's all to bring out the same point. So, anyways, we will leave that at that and quickly go to the UEFA Europa League, because yesterday, Dyche was off to a winning start, and Nottingham Forest were back to winning ways for the first time. For the second time this season, when they beat up against FC Porto by 2 goals to nil. On the opening day of the Premier League, they beat up against Brentford. I think it was by 3 goals to 1. And ever since then, they had never won a game of football. Remember, they got knocked out of the EFL Cup at the hands of Swansea, who beat them by 3 goals to 2, coming from 2 goals down. So, yesterday was their second victory of the season. And what better way to get it? Of course, they needed 2 penalties to secure that victory. One scored by Morgan Gibbs-White in the 19th minute, while the other was by Igor Jesus. Yes, I think it should be Igor Jesus. Yes, Igor Jesus in the 77th minute, So, and they won the game by 2 goals to nil. It won't matter how they won, it will matter that they won. That's all that is going to count. And that what will count is that, 1, they kept a clean sheet. 2, they won. 3, Dyche is off to a winning start at, I don't want to say crucial juncture, but whether it's going to be a matter of time to tell whether he was a stitch in time or not, because the season, as we know it, can be very, very long. Now, the task he has is to take Nottingham Forest out of that relegation bracket zone, because at the moment they are standing 18th on the Premier League log with about only 5 points. 1 victory, 2 draws, 1 draw, one of those draws coming against Burnley during the Ange Postecoglou era and things like that. So he was off to a winning start, and it doesn't. I do not think it gets any better than that for him. It doesn't. It doesn't. So all we can say is congratulations to Dyche. He really, really needed that result. 1, if you're going to get the buy-in, if you're going to get the buy-in of the players, getting off to a winning start goes a long, long way to prove yourself. It goes a really, really long way to prove that, So, Dyche is Nottingham Forest are the first team to beat FC Porto this season. Before tonight, Porto were 11 games unbeaten. So you can see breaking statistics already. The first team to beat up against FC Porto this season. I've waited a long time for that moment. Sean Dyche reflecting on the drama, on the grim start to life at Nottingham Forest as manager after his side defeated FC Porto. Like I said, as a manager, what he is going to have, or what you should expect, is a conservative style of play. Expect Nottingham Forest to be very, very difficult to score against in the long run. That's what is going to bring them into. Expect Nottingham Forest to try and leverage much on set pieces to score goals. That's in the long run. Expect Nottingham Forest to be the counter-attacking football team that it was against Nuno Espirito Santo, because that's the style of Sean Dyche. I do not think it's going to change any whatsoever. Even if you gave him Lionel Messi, he wouldn't change his style. He wouldn't change his playing style, you know. So basically, that's what it was. And you looked at Evangelos Marinakis in the stands, and he looked happy. He looked happy, you know. Of course, you know. And by the way, this was the first time Nottingham Forest were keeping a clean sheet this season. So you can see that there is a lot of positives to take away from that. There's a lot of positives to take away from that. But again, another key statistic: Nottingham Forest man, Sean Dyche is the first Nottingham Forest manager to win his first game in charge since 2020. Nottingham Forest won their first game since the opening day of the season. They kept their first clean sheet in 20 games. Why wouldn't that be the perfect start to life? And he has everything, he has it all to do come the weekend, because, like I said, action comes thick and fast. On Sunday, he will be checking his side away to the Vitality Stadium to play up against Bournemouth in one of the early kickoffs of Super Sunday. That game will come at 5 p.m. East African time, which is 3 p.m. UK time. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled to that to see the kinds of results. But one thing you expect, win or lose, they're not going to lose by big margins. You know, you're not going to see Nottingham Forest easily get beat 3-4-0. You know, you're not going to see that. Anyways, we will also leave that at that. The media pressure around Arsenal has started to pile up in terms of that expectation to win the Premier League title. And guess who starts it? As always, Gary Neville. Am I surprised? Not one bit. It's more like a hidden agenda. And he was talking about this on the overlap. And I could see Ian Wright's reservations, telling to him, when Liverpool were leading the table, 9-10 games in last season, how come you're not saying the same things? And then suddenly you have all this to say about Arsenal. But I told you guys, expect that to happen. The media is going to start hammering on that drum. For as long as Arsenal keep winning, they'll keep hammering on that drum. If they do falter, they'll hammer the drum beats in the different direction to suit whatever motives there are. I do not know, and I stand to be corrected. I do not know if there's any team that gets picked up more in the Premier League like Arsenal get, picked up on. Of course, I'm sure Manchester United fans may feel the same way about their own team. Liverpool could sort of feel the same way, or even Chelsea. But in sheer comparison, I think if we were to draw that graph, you may find that Arsenal are right up there in terms of the teams that get picked up on. But anyways, when you bid, you get picked up. So here's what's to come on match day 9 of the Premier League in as far as things are concerned. Like I told you last night, Leeds United are up against West Ham. I went for a 1-1 draw in this one for my prediction. Yesterday, we did do the preview of that game, Leeds versus West Ham United. So I won't, waste much time on that one. And then on Saturday, I told you there's no early kickoff. 2 games kickoff at 5 p.m. East African time, and then we will have a game at 7:30 p.m. and then the late kickoff at 10 p.m. So at 5 p.m., Chelsea will be up against Sunderland at home. Newcastle will be up against Fulham. Manchester United at 7:30 p.m. will host Brighton and Hove Albion, while Brentford will be at the Dyche Stadium at 10 p.m. against Liverpool. And on Super Sunday, we'll have 4 games kicking off at 3 p.m. UK time and 5 p.m. East African time when Arsenal hosts Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace did lose last night their game against um, Lanarka. They lost that game by a goal to nil. Crystal Palace made some changes, particularly to their midfield, objecting to bring in to start the likes of Adam Wharton and Taichi Kamada are going for Will Hughes and Jefferson Lemar in that midfield. Well, whether it was due to some precautions, but you could see that among the substitutions they made was to withdraw, Jefferson Lemar for Daichi Kamada and Yeremi Pino for Adam Wharton, but at the end of the day, not pan off. I think when you're a manager like Oliver Glasner, of course, while you want to rotate your team, I think he had at the back of his mind, one, that they had the home advantage, two, they are the better team, and I don't want to call it complacency, but it's a kind of bet that did not just pay off. He had betted on those changes working, but they do not deliver the desired result, and they ended up losing at home by a goal to nil. Why did he need to make those changes? Of course, in anticipation, he has to play away to Arsenal on Sunday, and that means they get 2 days of rest. They have Friday, Saturday. They have Friday for recovery, Saturday for a bit of training and review of Arsenal preparation for that, and then they go again on Sunday. In comparison, Arsenal played on Tuesday. They had their recoveries on Wednesday, trained for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then they'll play on Sunday. So you can see the difference. But those are some of the disadvantages or the responsibilities that you bear upon your shoulders when you qualify for these European competitions, like the UEFA Europa League and the UEFA Conference League. So there will be no excuses whatsoever there. But yeah. Then in the other game, Aston Villa will be at home against Manchester City, while Bournemouth will entertain Nottingham Forest, and Wolverhampton Wanderers will be at home against Burnley. Beta Pereira maybe living life dangerously, maybe hanging on by a thread. I'm just thinking. And then in the late kickoff on Sunday, Everton will be up against Tottenham Hotspurs. So again, so we did preview some of these games. We did preview the Sunderland game. We did preview. Okay, let's do the preview for some 3 games, particularly coming on Saturday. And then tomorrow we'll do the games. Sorry, not tomorrow, but at night we will get to do the games that will come on Sunday. In that sort of order. So let's kick off things with Newcastle up against Fulham. But did I give my prediction for Chelsea Sunderland? No, I did not give my prediction. Okay, I'll be giving it. But yeah, like I told you, Newcastle have not had the best start to the Premier League campaign. Their victories have come, sort of in between. One of those being a 1-0 victory against Wolverhampton Wanderers, and Nick Voltmada scoring with that one, while their last victory came against Nottingham Forest in a 2-0 victory with Bruno Guimaraes and Nick Voltmada scoring from the penalty spot to win that one 2-0. But also in between there, they had a goalless draw against Bournemouth, lost to Arsenal by 2-1, as well as losing to Brighton and Hove Albion last weekend by 2-1. So it's been a bit of a difficult start for them, like I said, but in no way or shape has it been any easier for Fulham, because when you look at Fulham in sheer comparison on the other side, is they've lost their last they've lost some of their very, very recent games. They've lost, I think, 3 consecutive games. They lost to Arsenal by 0-0, lost to AFC Bournemouth by 3-1, lost to Aston Villa by 3-1. They beat up against Brentford by 3-1 and beat up against Leeds United by 0-0. So they've won 2 and lost 3 out of their last 5. While in sheer comparison, Newcastle have lost 2, have won 2, and drawn 1 in their last 5. So the disparity in form is only by a draw. When you look at head-to-head between the two sides in regards to the last five fixtures, you'll find that, give or take, Fulham is one of those teams that are a thorn in the foot for Newcastle. Last season, they managed to beat up against Newcastle, home and away. At St. James's Park, they beat them by 2-1, while away to Craven Cottage, they beat the same side by 3-1. When you go back to last season, but one, Newcastle won the engagement by home and away. At Craven Cottage, it was a 1-0 victory, while it was 3-0 at St. James's Park. And when you went further back to the 2022-2023 campaign, you find that Newcastle won the home fixture by a goal to nil, while they lost at home last season. I think they will be looking to correct that mistake. In terms of how they do apply themselves, like I said, not much has changed for Newcastle, but the departure of Alexander Isak, who they managed to replace with Nick Portmada, who has had a fairly decent start to his campaign, because if he has scored how many? 3 Premier League goals so far? Against Wolves, against Arsenal, against Nottingham Forest. So you look at, and against Brighton, by the way, and against Brighton, he was the goal scorer. So that's 4 goals for him. I think players like Anthony Elanga are yet to click into their mojo that they had at Nottingham Forest last season. We know he was one of the biggest goal contributors for that Nottingham Forest side. Anthony Gordon blowing hot and cold, sometimes. But to expect that midfield to be a bit triumphant, Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, and Jolinton, then the back four, I do not think it will change much. With Dan Burn coming in at left back, Steven Botman, Malik Theo, Kieran Trippier, Nick Pope, of course, in goal. It's because it's a home game. I don't know. Fulham also losing 4 games on the speed. Is it possible? Very, very much so. Newcastle, I don't know. I'm convinced. A part of me thinks they can win this game by 2-1, but also there's a draw in my mind. I do not know. So I'd go 1x. If I'm betting on the game, I'd go 1x. But while Fulham were able to put up a lot of resistance against Arsenal, it's Newcastle we're talking about. They at St. James's Park, behind with all that crowd. Yes, they had the same crowd when they lost there by 2-1 in February. And that should be something that carries, Fulham through this game, knowing that Raul Jimenez and Rodrigo Muniz were the goal scorers of the day, with Jacob Murphy's goal that had come earlier in about the 37th minute, turning out to be a mere consolation. This time around, Raul Jimenez did return in that game against Arsenal, but yeah, you felt that he struggled with a bit of, lack of full fitness. Rodrigo Muniz is still out, to the best of my understanding. But with that said, Newcastle, that midfield battle, I think Newcastle will win the midfield battle. I do not see how Fulham win the midfield battle, even though they have Sasa Lukic in there, who, by the way, is struggling through a massive muscle injury. When you look at the injury list, you have Lewis Hall, Tino Livramento, and Yohan Wissa on the side of Newcastle. Then on the side of Fulham, they have a long injury list of Joachim Anderson with a hamstring injury, Tim Kearney, Harry Wilson. Those ones have knocks, so they could be back on time. Sasa Lukic, Samuel Chikwueze with a calf injury, Anthony Robinson, Rodrigo Muniz with muscle injury. So I don't know. It could depend. You see, for teams of the caliber of Fulham, you need all your best players to be available. Joachim Anderson has been very, very good in that defense. Sasa Lukic is very good in that midfield. Rodrigo Muniz, we know what he offers Fulham, going forward in the attacking sense of things. So without those players, even though Newcastle, they themselves have some injuries to contend with, I'm going to go Newcastle winning by 2-1. That's my prediction for that game. For the game between Chelsea and Sunderland, for the game between Chelsea and Sunderland, in the other game, I'm going Sunderland. Have they ever conceded 3 goals this season? Feel like Chelsea are in that sort of feel-good factor, like I said yesterday. They've won a decent number of games, in recent times. Of course, in between there is a defeat somewhere, but I think they've done well, So let's see. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm really thinking to myself that Chelsea win this one. I'll go to 1 Chelsea. Anyways, then let's discuss the elephants in the room, or the elephant in the room. Manchester United. 3 victories out of the last 4 in the Premier League. That's as good as United have been in the Premier League this season. 2 defeats in the last 5, 3 victories. They just don't do draws. Yes, of course they have a draw this season. They did 1 against Fulham. It was a 1-all draw. I think that was that match day 2 or match day 3? Thereabouts, So they are up against Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton have 2 draws, 2 victories out of their last 5. It's been looking sort of good for them. Their last loss came against Bournemouth in the Premier League. They lost by 2-1. They drew 2-2 against Tottenham Hotspur. They should have won that game because they had a 2-0 lead. They went away to Chelsea and won 3-1. They're not afraid of going to Old Trafford and winning there, because last season they beat up against Man United home and away, 3-1 at Old Trafford and 2-1 at the Amex Stadium. By the way, they've won their last 2 visits at Old Trafford. That's what should scare Man United fans, if you are a Manchester United fan out there. So then, after the Chelsea victory, they had the 1-all draw against Wolverhampton Wanderers, a game that they should have won but didn't. Then beat up against Newcastle by 2-1 last weekend. So when you look at the last 16 meetings in the Premier League, there's 8 wins for either side, 0 draws. There's always a winner in this one. The question is going to be, who is going to be the winner this time around in this particular fixture? Because increasingly, it looks like Manchester United. Increasingly. But, like I told you, Brighton have beaten up against Man United twice in their last 2 visits to Old Trafford, while Man United have won once in their last 2 visits to the Amex Stadium. In other words, when you look at the last 5 fixtures between these 2, Manchester United have only won this tie once, and they lost all the other occasions. That victory came in the 2023-2024 season when Man United went to Brighton and won there by 2-0. But all the others, last season, 3-1, 2-1, 3-1 at Old Trafford, 2-1 at the Amex. Then they also lost 3-1 at Old Trafford. That was for the 2023-2024 campaign. And then also lost 0-0. So, but Man United have all that positivity, that encouragement, that feel-good factor, because they just won a game against their biggest rival in the Premier League or in football history. and that's Liverpool. That's Liverpool. They beat Liverpool by 2-1. When you went things further back before the international break, they did win a game of football. They won against Sunderland, beating them by 2-0. I don't know if it's just me or you guys too, but in the last couple of games, I've watched certain patterns of play and looked like, and I enjoyed what Manchester United were doing. I really, really enjoyed how they were playing. I could see certain patterns of play in terms of their combativeness, congesting the midfield, making it narrow, then spreading the wing backs, and it's paid off. It has paid off. It has indeed paid off. You know, it has indeed paid off. But like I said, Brighton will come to Old Trafford knowing that we have beaten up this Man United before at home. Players like Kau Mitoma, Yankuba Minte were among the goal scorers, while Bruno Fernandes scored from the penalty spot in that last 3-1 loss for United at Old Trafford against Brighton. Now, for everything that Man United have done in the last 2 games, the only way they make that valid and worth standing by is if they can win against Brighton or afford or not lose. But like I've said, there's no history of a draw between these two sides in the 16 league meetings that they've had. Either side has won it 8 times. A part of me wants to believe in this Manchester United side that the combination of Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, Matas Delit, but Diego Dalot, Amadou Diallo, or Patrick Togu, whichever gets to start in those, wing back positions. Bruno Fernandes alongside Casemiro, Brian Mbomo, Mason Mount, and Cunha. Whether we have a rotation to remove Mason Mount and Cunha pulls back, and we have Benjamin Sesko start, all remains to be seen. But I don't know. I'm feeling a bit positive about Manchester United, but they've also disappointed us before. Brighton have a tendency of blowing hot and cold. They have that tendency. Yes, they won last weekend. And thanks to Danny Welbeck's best. They have that tendency of blowing hot and cold. Van Hecke has been suspect this season. Vulnerable. If you pick up on him, you can get something off of him. Carlos Baleba has not had the decent start to the season. That we must acknowledge. He's not had it. Max Di Kupia, good, very, very good player. James Milner, Mzee Wakazi, Yasin Ayari, United will have to be wary of him. He can't strike that ball from distance. Ruta, Yankuba Minte, Danny Welbeck, pressing his former bosses. Remember, he did play for Man United before leaving to join Arsenal. Then after he left Arsenal, went to what? It wasn't Sunderland. Trying to remember where he went before ending up at Brighton and Hove Albion. But yeah, Lewis Dunk, Kadioglu, Wafer. I don't know. So it's going to be a big stage. It's going to be a big audition stage for Carlos Baleba. I think this is when he has to give a man of the match kind of performance to prove to Man United to say, yeah, I'm worth thinking about. That do not look elsewhere. Do not look to Adam Wharton. Do not look to Conor Gallagher from Atletico de Madrid. I'm the guy you need in that midfield. So do not look at Elliot Anderson from Nottingham Forest. I'm the guy you should be looking at, So he needs to give a man of the match kind of performance. However, he's not started the season in decent form, Carlos Baleba. That's why almost every single game, he gets substituted, which wasn't literally the case. It was last season. So yeah, He has a point to prove. Carlos Baleba. Will he prove it? We can only wait and see. Man United, for the first time under Ruben Amorim, have won 2 consecutive Premier League games. Against Sunderland, against Liverpool. Can they make it better and win 3? They have won their last 3 fixtures at Old Trafford, beating Burnley by 3 goals to 2, beating Chelsea by 2 goals to 1, and beating Sunderland by 2 goals to 0. And with that note, therefore, I'm going to 1 Manchester United. Yep. Will I come back to eat my words on Sunday or Monday? Anytime I will say. But I'm going to 1 Manchester United. Yep. That's how, I don't want to say that's how confident I am, but yeah, that's my prediction for that game. Then the other game is Liverpool versus Liverpool away to the Dyche Stadium against Brentford. Very sort of team that plays with a low block because they play with the back 5. That's Brentford. They've had their fair share of decent results. When you look at the last 5 games, they've beaten up against West Ham by 2 goals to 0, lost to Manchester City by 1 goal to 0, beat up against Man United by 3 goals to 1, lost against Fulham by 3 goals to 1, draw against Chelsea by 2 goals to 2. Against big teams, they performed fairly well. Fairly well. A 2-all draw away to Chelsea is a good result. Beating United 3-1 is a good result. Losing to Fulham 3-1 is a bad result. Losing to Manchester City by 1 goal to 0 is a bad result, but not as worse as it may sound. They managed to limit the damage for Manchester City. It's literally brought Erling Haaland carrying Manchester City forward. And if he were to get injured, I do not know what would become of Man City in the interim. It's not to say that they do not have solutions within their squad. I'm sure Pep Guardiola does have those, but you know, so Brentford are a very, very stubborn side. For those of you that watch them on Monday night against West Ham, you will know that. And then on the other side, we're talking about a Liverpool side who have lost their last 3 consecutive Premier League games. Their last victory came in a 2-1 victory against Everton in the Merseyside derby, prior to which they had beaten up against Burnley by 1 goal to 0, unconvincingly by the way, because they needed a 95th minute penalty converted by Mo Salah to win that one. You know, so but in midweek, that was on Wednesday, they bounced back with a victory against the Eintracht Frankfurt in the UEFA Champions League, beating them by 5 goals to 1 in a game where Mo Salah was brought to the bench. We saw Hugo Ekitike starting in the same lineup with Alexander Isak. We saw Florian Wirtz providing a burst of assists. We saw Curtis Jones alongside Dominic Szoboszlai. We saw Cody Gakpo starting that very game. So, you know, you can see that the midfield had Szoboszlai, Curtis Jones, and Florian Wirtz. Then on the wings, you had Gakpo, you had Ekitike, and Isak in the 4-3-3 kind of shape, whichever way you want to define. And they won convincingly. When you look at the last 5 meetings between the 2 sides, Liverpool just wins it. They just win. I do not remember the single time Brentford picked up a point against Liverpool. And like I said, for Liverpool, there's no better time to bounce back. They started off with that emphatic victory against Eintracht Frankfurt in spectacular style. I see no reason for a team that has only scored 1 goal against them in the last 5 fixtures why they cannot go and dismiss them. Because last season they beat them home and away by 2 goals to 0 in either fixture. Last season, but one, they beat them by 4 goals to 1 at the Dyche Stadium and 3-0 at Anfield. And then there's a 1-0 victory for Liverpool when you go back to 2023. And we're talking about Thomas Frank, who was in charge at the time. This time on, it's the rookie, Keith Andrews. He's done fairly well, but I see no victory for Brentford here. I see Liverpool winning this one 3 goals to 0. Yep. Call me delusional, but I have every reason to believe that Liverpool can win. Will they maintain the same starting 11? I would argue, do not try to fix what's not broken. If that starting 11 was good enough to beat Frankfurt by a 4-goal margin, because remember it was 5-1, then clearly, why would you change it? Why would you change it? I've maintained the same starting 11. But we'll wait and see what will come on Saturday. Let's kick off at 10 p.m. But I'm going 3-0 for Liverpool. Liverpool to even keep a clean sheet. But they'll have to be worried of Igor Thiago and Kevin Schade. Different monsters when you face them. Different monsters. Different monsters when you face them. No? Highly athletic. They have good chemistry. Jordan Henderson facing his former bosses. Will he have a point to prove? I don't necessarily think so. Just has leadership to provide to his side. But I suspect they will play with their back five, a 5-3-2 kind of system. That's how I think they will assemble. But they will still lose. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. But on Saturday, the Spanish La Liga, do not miss out on Girona up against Oviedo, Espanyol up against Elche, Athletic Bilbao against Getafe, while Valencia will be up against Villarreal in those games. In the German Bundesliga, Augsburg up against RB Leipzig, Borussia Mönchengladbach will welcome Bayern Munich, Eintracht Frankfurt will be up against St. Pauli, Hamburger SV will be up against Wolfsburg, while Hoffenheim will be up against FC Heidenheim. And Borussia Dortmund will take on FC Cologne. In the Italian Serie A, still on Saturday, Parma will be up against Como, Lecce against Udinese, Inter will be at home against Napoli at 7 p.m. East African time. That's a must-watch game. Do not miss out on that. Cremonese up against Atlanta. In the French League One, Brest will be up against Paris Saint-Germain. AC Monaco will take on Toulouse. Lens will be up against Olympique de Marseille. That's in your favorite leagues. Then on Super Sunday, the Spanish La Liga will bring us Mallorca up against Levante. Real Madrid will be up against Barcelona on Super Sunday. At a 6:15 p.m. The El Clasico is on this weekend. We will preview that game possibly tomorrow or on Saturday. We will preview that game, the El Clasico. Real Madrid at top, Barcelona coming second. So whoever wins that game will go top or stay top. Osasuna up against Celta Vigo, Rayo Vallecano up against Deportivo. We know that Barcelona dominated the El Clasico throughout last campaign. 4 matches, all they won all. In the Copa del Rey, in the Super Copa Hispana, they just won everything. They just won everything that there was to. Beating Real Madrid by 4 goals to 0 at the Bernabeu, beating them by 4 goals to 3 in the reverse fixture, beating them by 3-2 in the Copa del Rey final, beating them 5-2 in the Super Copa Hispana. Can Real Madrid plot the perfect revenge against Barcelona? Barcelona are not in the best option. But we will wait and see what those two sides will have to offer for us going into the weekend. But yeah, speaking of which, I think I need to be in a place where I can keep watching the Arsenal game, because it will kick off at 5 p.m. And as we get into the second half, actually we will already be in the second half, and then the Clasico will be starting. So yeah, we'll be looking forward to that one. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure doing this with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day and a blessed weekend. Bye bye for now. Stay blessed.